Hello and welcome back to the pipeline. We will be letting Danny introduce in a quick second, but just a brief announcement on behalf of Danny. Want to give him a big shout out. Danny Pipelines over the weekend secured a Mrs. Pipelines. That's right, Danny is engaged. She said yes. Only stipulation was a NADS roll, easy trade. No, jokes aside, massive shout out to Danny. It's a huge life goal. And big wins coming all around, specifically for Danny in this case, but Monad Switchboard in general. I wanted to just share that news. Congratulations, Danny.
Congrats, Danny.
Congrats.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, always excited to see that pipeline family growing, and this is definitely a special one for me to bring in the Mrs. Pipelines. Maybe we'll have to do a special episode down the road and bring her on. Got to reciprocate for that NADS role at some point. But, without further ado, super excited for this episode. I think it's really been a long time coming. A lot of synergy between Monad and Switchboard. So absolutely delighted to have the co-founders on here. We have Chris and Mitch. Thanks for coming on, guys. How's it going?
It's going great. Thanks so much for having us, Danny. We've been big fans of Monad since the early days, so glad to be on the pipeline.
Awesome. Well, certainly an honor to chat. I think this is going to be a really interesting one for the community to dive into. And certainly there's a lot of awareness across the Monad community about Switchboard, but for anyone that maybe hasn't gotten up to speed yet, would love to hear a little bit about each of your personal backgrounds and how you ended up working on the early days of Switchboard.
Chris,
Sure. I can go ahead and start. So this is Chris, one of the co-founders of Switchboard. I've been in crypto actually for a pretty long time. Was an early employee at Circle back in 2013, 2014, and worked a variety of different roles, but probably the most notable one was I was the second person on their trading desk, along with the at CMS Holdings. It was a very different time, and seeing that grow and evolve from a small sort of operation to a massive 24/7 global trading desk really changed my view, not just on crypto, but also just sort of what's possible with hard work and dedication. For myself, left in 2019 as our team was being sold over to Kraken, and at least me personally, decided to venture out on my own and started investing and building. One of the ecosystems we ended up getting involved with was the Solana ecosystem. And that was primarily driven by, even at the time, we kind of saw that there was a need for high performance L1s and cheap chains to really enable new use cases. Was fortunate enough to be pretty early there and quickly realized, there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be built. And if somebody's going to build it, why isn't it you? And one of the things that, at least me personally being on the trading side, I always saw and was always bullish on was this idea that everything eventually will be tradable on DEXs. And I think now it's probably not that controversial contrarian of an opinion, but in 2018, even 2019, prior to sort of DeFi summer, it was still sort of not clear that was actually going to be the case. We actually originally set out to build that type of product, but quickly realized actually if you want to build long-tail derivatives, you need some form of Oracle to be able to support that. And so Switchboard came from that. Mitch was one of my good friends in San Francisco, also one of the smartest folks I know. So we teamed up to build that in May of 2021. So Mitch, if you want to give a bit of your background.
Yeah, sure. So I was introduced to Chris actually through a friend in college that moved out to San Francisco, same time that we did. He started his own crypto venture that really got him into the space, met Chris at Circle through that. And I went there because I joined Google Cloud Security. I was actually leading a team on VPC networking in Google Cloud for a few years. And before that, I was doing security for Google hardware. But after a while, I just knew the corporate life wasn't for me. I kind of talked to my other buddy about it a lot and how I wanted to go do something on my own. Introed me to Chris here. And Chris is like, there's a lot of need for Oracle on these chains. You want to try to prototype this? So I made a demo that took me just a 2-week prototype, and Chris closed our seed round within 2 weeks. So I was like, I guess I better leave the company, Google now. So I went and took this journey, and it's been growing and growing ever since. And I'm very thankful that we've gotten to the size and we can actually cover a total, I think, of $2 billion in secured volume now, which is really a great milestone. And I think we do over 2 million transactions a day. And at least on Solana, I think we do 3 to 7% of the traffic, depending on the day.
Yeah, and one thing I just want to say is, having been through that, and I'm sure you guys feel this too, once you go all in on crypto, you can't go back. It's just that step, and, it's very exciting, but also at times, very stressful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that helps the most when you're all in and it's not going your way is building with an awesome group of people, right? So like that core team is super important for like your career path, but also just like your life in general. The amount of interactions you have with them every single day. So I have a ton of respect and love for the team over at Switchboard. Chris and Dan, my old boss, going super far back is an awesome story. There's some deep lore there. But Chris has been one of my oldest friends in the space. So love seeing it come full circle like this. One question just to kind of start it off for anyone who is not familiar at a high level or with the intricacies of Switchboard. If there's just like a brief background to set some context, right? Like what is kind of the purpose and what are you guys building at Switchboard?
Sure, Chris, I can take this one real quick.
Sure, go ahead.
Cool. So really the thesis is we were entering the space and we evaluated the Oracle market, and what we saw was a lot of these data providers were pretty static sources. It wasn't really flexible enough for people to go and bring the data that they might want to see or from the sources they want to see. And a lot of these were actually pretty much a black box of how you source the data. And it's kind of the antithesis of what you expect from crypto, being a black box even though it's on-chain. So the idea was, how can we make the fully transparent Oracle that anyone can go and build and make themselves? So that was really the mission that we went upon when we started the company. We go along the route of programmable oracles or an Oracle platformer where you can go and build whatever data flow or data stream that you want, pull, transform, combine, repo, these types of things. And as you go down that route, people really like it because then they can list things the same day that they're minted, and you open up a lot of new markets instantly. That's my motivation there. I'll let Chris go ahead with his.
Yeah, no, I mean, similar to Mitch, I think we all saw sort of what the potential was back in the day with crypto and particularly with DeFi. And the thing that kind of frustrated me is like, why are these markets, why are these products not being created? And, it turns out there's actually a few reasons. One of them was, the high transaction fees and costs associated with certain chains. Another one was having access to high quality oracles and specifically customizable oracles that can sort of spin up more ephemeral markets that, might not make sense for a place where you're expecting a certain amount of volume or a certain amount of capacity to justify the TX fees. But when you have lower TX fees and when you have new environments where block space may not be as cheap or maybe it's faster, you can open up and create new products that weren't previously possible. And this is also part of the reason why, we're so bullish sort of the Monad ecosystem and other high-performance EVM ecosystems, because it's going to allow and enable and unlock these new use cases that previously, just didn't make economic sense on, say, ETH as an L1.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. And I think we're starting to hit on this already, but, clearly one of the most important aspects of being in any nascent industry is the ability to see potential. And that's certainly true in crypto, right? I think that's why ultimately all of us are here, is because we see a lot of potential in this space. But Switchboard, it's no secret, was one of the earliest builder groups that seemed to see a lot of potential in the idea behind Monad and to get involved in the sense of like public support. And as we were building out the early stages of our community, that was something that was really awesome. And I think we all saw a lot of potential for collaboration there, but would love to hear from your perspectives, what drove you to show so much conviction and support for Monad in such early stages, even now as we're still in this pre-testnet phase?
Yeah, so, I mean, I think it was a few things. Number one, from just a tech perspective, the idea of parallelizable EVMs and bringing some of the architecture that you've seen on other high-performance ecosystems and other high-performance chains over to the EVM is kind of uniquely compelling, right? If it works, it sort of unlocks all these other use cases. And, from our perspective, it was one of those things where it aligns with our thesis. It aligns with the types of products and things we'd love to see on crypto. And also it opens it up to a much broader, larger community that may not have been possible. And it's funny, and Kevin and I know some other folks and friends of mine will say this. I was probably an ETH maxi from 2016 to call it 2018, and really until sort of DeFi summer took off. It was only then and sort of some of the other stuff where it kind of changed my opinion on how a lot of applications and a lot of development will happen on the space. So seeing new approaches that really enable new use cases, really not just by a combination of speed, but also by a combination of lower fees, was really uniquely compelling to us. I could say team, I could say Keone and James, who were great, but I think, the bigger thing, and it's sort of resolving all of that, is also the community. And Monad had a very strong community, and to this day, we're really excited to work with not just the Monad team, but also the Monad community.
Yeah, I love that. That take. It's something that has just come up more and more on like eco growth calls and BD calls, and when we're talking to other teams that are excited to work with Monad. I would say over half of them, either the spark or one of the big factors is the community, which to me at least is unprecedented. Like I've never heard of that being like a driving force, and it's just awesome to see, right? I think that it's something that like everyone in crypto has a deep kind of appreciation for like culture and lore. Like that's, if you have been in crypto for over a year, you cannot help but dedicate like X% of your brain to crypto lore and culture. Like even if you don't go on Twitter that often, it's just there, right? And it's super important. So yeah, helping to foster that and just make sure it's like a reality and it's like good positive impact from the Monad side has been fulfilling. And then at the same time, right, Switchboard, close partner of ours, should be able to like get excited about our partner wins as well. So really excited to see how that kind of unfolds moving forward. One question for you guys would be, how, like, what is Switchboard's kind of main advantage, or how does Switchboard look to differentiate itself, like in the broader crypto ecosystem as a product?
Sure. Chris, I could take that one first, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
Perfect. Yeah, so the one motivation or the one path that we're really pushing for right now is on-demand data, where you don't have to do essentially any setup on-chain before you can make an index on some piece of information. One thing we're doing right now, there's a few different models for oracles if you don't know them. There's the push model where, the provider is constantly streaming it on-chain. There's the pull model where there's some data layer that can be signed and then aggregated back onto different chains. And then there's a callback model where someone could request a piece of information on chain, the oracles go respond just when you need it. What we found is that people really attach to the pull model, where there's a data layer or some information layer that people bring this information onto. Providers saying what goes to that data layer. So that's kind of why we're trying to make this free-form model where you don't have any restrictions on that data layer. You still give a schema of what you want to our network. It brings it on chain, and you don't have to do a single transaction beforehand to save this somewhere that you can start using. So in a single blockchain transaction, go hit the Oracle network, say exactly what you want to do, what you want to get, how you want to transform the data. It goes on chain, and in that same transaction, atomically, no latency, you do what you want with it. And what that really does is makes a lot of room for ephemeral markets. What if you want to make bring data on chain for a game that's only lasting 2 hours? Is that really economical for a bigger provider to make a new data feed and support that and turn that down? Like, that's not really a story for these other providers that is really easy with Switchboard.
Yeah, and to really expand on that, it goes back to the customizability component. If you want a BTC USD price feed for, say, a BTC USD perpetual swap on DeFi, there's a million different options and ways to do that. And quite frankly, there are many providers that are great and have great options there. But if you really want to create, say, a customized product maybe built on top of that, or you want to create a new index for, say, the meme coin of the day, you can do that in 2 seconds using Switchboard. And I encourage all the listeners of this to go try it out at app.switchboard and just build a data feed for a new coin that you're interested in, just to check it out. We think that that's going to allow and open up new markets. And when I think of DeFi derivatives as a product, we look back to the centralized exchange race. We spent, or at least I spent a lot of time at Circle. And Kevin, I'm sure you heard the stories from a lot of other folks with Poloniex and some of the stuff that there. I think a big reason why you saw Binance take over a lot of market share from other exchanges was because in 2017 and 2018, they kept listing new products fast. And I think that same or similar dynamic will also occur on DeFi, where the DeFi derivatives platforms and products, whether they're lending protocols, whether it's derivatives markets, that list the newest products fastest and are able to sort of acquire enough critical network effects there, will be the ones that ultimately win by catering to that new user demand.
Yeah, completely makes sense. I certainly agree. There's a lot of potential and a lot of new markets that this opens up, especially evolving over the past few years. When I first heard about Switchboard back in 2021, it was a very different crypto climate overall. And certainly as I've gotten deeper into the space and the space itself has progressed, I've heard a lot more about the need for oracles in crypto over these past couple years. But would love to hear from your perspective, since Switchboard was founded in 21, what's different about the crypto climate now and the on-chain data and oracle climate as opposed to when Switchboard was first founded?
Yeah, I think when we were first founded, I kind of had this idea in my head that, let's call it non-price speed use cases would be much larger than they have turned out to be. And I think from just a thesis perspective, it was probably like we expected there to be a lot more activity on, say, prediction markets, a lot more on, say, on-chain insurance, a lot more just across the board beyond just sort of DeFi derivatives and borrow lend. I would say that we've probably directionally been wrong there, and the majority of activity that you see on or for products that require oracles are still primarily there. That being said, I think there's quite a few areas that have seen a lot of growth. One of them is sort of GameFi, if you will, whether it's Gamblefy or GameFi. Just things that require or are more sort of game intensive and may need randomness, for example, secure randomness. I think we've seen more growth there than we might have expected. And then I also think the types of products that you're seeing on chain have changed a little bit. And there's probably at least, well, maybe now there's a bit more, but a lot of vault interest kind of died out during the bear market. You just saw a lot of vault products either shut down or pivot. They're coming back a bit now, but I was kind of surprised that there hasn't been more of that activity. And then I think from just the types of things and sort of where the market, or not market, but more sort of the ecosystem is at the moment, I think you're seeing a lot more liquidity on chain and volume on chain than you saw in 2021. And to me, that shift is only going to get greater as both the UX and sort of products that are offered on DeFi products only improves and gets better. And then also, as sort of the on-ramp situation either gets worse or gets harder.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. Curious, kind of going off of that, if there's specific verticals or projects that you're specifically excited to support, or perhaps something even uniquely enabled by Switchboard's architecture and design.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is really some form of ephemeral markets, whether it's on DeFi derivatives, whether it's prediction markets. I think this idea that everything will be tradable is going to become a reality in some way, shape, or form. It's just going to be what products are the ones that people end up sort of settling on. So I think right now, you see a ton of that in the meme coin space. I think if meme coin mania continues, you'll see many different varieties of this on Monad and other ecosystems that we'd be excited to support. Other things as well, again, I actually am still sort of a big believer in a lot of the prediction markets and sort of insurance use cases. There's a lot of reasons as to why the insurance market is pretty inefficient. I think there's a lot of things that can be done there, bringing that on chain, whether it's via RWAs or whether it's via permissionless protocols such as Nexus Mutual and other similar offerings.
So one of naming a few of I'll call them like the emergent verticals in crypto, right? Things that are not yet major use cases, but are showing early signs of having high potential, and starting to dominate the market share of what crypto's used for. Does anything stand out? Like, obviously we can talk about like 10 verticals, but does anything stand out as maybe one or two that you think of as like either the most exciting or maybe the highest conviction at kind of moving the crypto industry?
Well, I think RWAs has been one. It's kind of been a narrative that's been pushed for a long time, but I actually think we're seeing a lot of traction on it this year in particular. You can look at Ondo, you can look at some of the other big names there. There's been a ton of activity. I'd also say, I wouldn't necessarily consider it an outlier, but it is surprising to see how fast the adoption has gone. Probably something like Athena, right, where it's the stablecoin network effects are pretty large, and to see such a just rapid sort of increase in supply for it is pretty telling, and at least in my opinion was sort of one of the surprising things to see over the past 2 months. But congrats to that team on the success that they've had, and I think you'll probably see a lot more being done in the RWA space and in sort of that type of product space that you're seeing there, especially if yields stay elevated. It's just you don't go zero to $1 billion and don't expect there to be more activity in that particular vertical.
For sure. Yeah, and I think does anything stand out for RWAs as like, oh, this is maybe the most exciting? Like RWA being a large kind of space. Anything stands out in particular? I have one that I really like, but would love to hear your side.
I think what Ondo is doing is pretty interesting. There's others as well, Mountain Protocol and a handful of others. I think the most interesting thing, though, is finding some way to bring off-chain collateral, right, and in a secure way, make it on-chain collateral. And in some ways, the biggest driver of that might actually not even be, quote, RWAs. It might be actually, new forms of wrapped Bitcoin that are entering DeFi. And I know that's another narrative that's been pushed, but, it doesn't take that much, back-of-the-envelope math, potentially a massive opportunity, really for every ecosystem, by introducing new forms of collateral that are there, exogenous, sort of flows through, and helps secure the next generation of DeFi apps.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that is one area. The other one that I would probably pick are interest-bearing stablecoins. Mm-hmm. I do think that for all the potential and high-level things we talk about that crypto can change the world on, there are few that have proven product market fit. A lot of it is speculation on things that can work in the future, and almost none of them work better in a decentralized environment than a centralized environment, right? Or at least more efficiently. Interest-bearing stables is stablecoin and speculation. Those are the two key pieces of product market fit that exist today. With an interest-bearing stable, you can take a stablecoin and make it objectively better for payments and for the end user than anything that you could do with Web 2 ramps, Web 2 rails. So that stands out to me as it's uniquely enabled by crypto, impossible to build anywhere else, and is objectively better than the current system. Really, really excited to see how that plays out. Right, the stablecoin market's 100 billion plus. There's a ton of room for that to grow as more and more payments come onto crypto rails. And one really good thing about stablecoin payments is they function much better on performant, highly scalable blockchains. So yeah, looking forward to what the next 2 years look like for that. I think it's really a 2-year thesis. I would be very surprised if interest-bearing stables aren't a multi-billion or $100 billion market over the next 2 years.
Yeah, I think it's kind of obvious that that's the direction we're headed towards, and I hope that the reg concerns, depending on the jurisdiction, folks are in, are alleviated. I think on that note as well, one thing that I'm personally really excited about, and ties into kind of why we started this, is more and more activity moving on chain. We talk about oracles for the long tail, and I spent a lot of time talking about the DeFi use cases, but the reality is there's a lot of non DeFi use cases that are also relevant. And look, if we want to bring the next billion people on chain, you need to have a way or have a product that appeals to billions of people. So I'm actually personally really excited at some of the stuff like the Shopify integrations with crypto and USDC and stablecoins, where you effectively enable seamless commerce in jurisdictions that either it might not be easy to access the rails, or the payment rails may not be available.
Makes complete sense. And we're kind of zooming out in general on, what we think about the future of crypto. So would love to hear, anything that you can share about what the next couple years on the macro might look like for Switchboard. What do you think are the most important areas to cover? What applications are you excited to support? Anything along those lines?
Yeah. So, I'll start at a high level. I think, my personal thesis is you're going to see crypto in terms of just size of activity and everything happening on chain, 100x over the next few years. And in that world, you're going to have lots of demand to bring data from the real world off chain, on chain. We kind of realized very quickly on, a deliberate approach that the only way to really scale to those use cases is to have a customizable, flexible Oracle solution. It just doesn't work if you need to interface with a BD team person every single time you want to create a data feed. That's just not a scalable model, and you can't support all these new use cases that are coming on chain over the next few years doing so. So by having a permissionless, customizable offering, it's our hope that we can help take a small part of that market and grow with it as this industry explodes. And that's really sort of the core thesis. And so much of crypto is really just surviving. I don't think people 5 years ago would have expected that stablecoins would have been as big a market as they are today. And it's incredible to see the growth, and it's incredible to see the level of adoption that we're seeing across the globe. Not just in the West, but in many different countries.
100%. And what do you think, or what do you know to be the most challenging data feed or use cases to support?
It's a good question.
For one example, I think one that you actually need multiple data points in a single feed to understand a piece of information. We were given this example a long time ago, but let's say races, where you have to actually know.
A table.
Basically a table of events. How do you represent that data accurately without sending something that's not numeric? And how do you what are the different ways that you can really succinctly come to consensus on that type of information? And there are ways, we do have different methods of verification. There's ZK verification, there's hardware verification, and there's different methods of consensus. But in all, some of them are more gas efficient than others, and it's really how do you keep this very efficient, very concise, and still have the trustlessness. So there are ways now. It's you could spin up multiple data feeds to represent that information, or you can send back an entire buffer and take on one of the ZK methods of basically verifying a whole scheme of information rather than a single data point. But it's not going to be as fast, so it's a balance between fidelity and the type of information you want.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think there's people are very used to like an iPhone app experience where they just understand when I click on this, all this stuff loads, and it's very easy for me. Not a lot of time is spent thinking about all of the technical nuance that goes into actually producing the end result that the consumer has. Hearing the difficulties in tables, right? It kind of peels back the onion. And allows us to take one deeper look into what's actually going on under the hood.
Yeah.
There's also just some things. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, on that note, actually, when you deal with parallelized blockchains, they all have to do with parallelizing read-write locking of different storage. And when you do that, and you're actually dealing with really high-speed apps, you really have to think about lock contention at a certain point. Especially how you manage the storage blobs and how you lock it. I know Monad does locks of storage blips of 200 bits of information anywhere you go. So if you have an instruction that writes to one of those points 100 times a second, let's say, how much are you taking away the parallelism advantages that Monad can give? And how can you structure your application thinking about those things beforehand to really make sure you're getting all the speed that Monad can offer you? And you do have to think about it at kind of the technical level to take advantage of the real pride, or the real, I would say, messiah of speed that Monad is bringing here. So I think just structuring it with technical knowledge that can take advantage of each of these chains, and not the people that are blasting out implementations to all these chains just for saying you're there. And it's really important to know the details of the chain you're building on.
Yeah, I feel like there are kind of two classes of builders currently building applications for Monad. And one are people with the idea of just taking an existing application, and they're like, oh, well, I can just copy paste it, run it on Monad,
right,
and it's going to give me 100x performance out of the gate. Yes, that is true, right? 100x, that's very good. There's a second class that deeply understands the innovations that have gone on the parallel execution side, but really kind of the secret sauce being asynchronous read and write to the state database. And honestly, having like the only custom state database that allows that in all of crypto, right? So if you understand what's actually going on with like the ones and zeros in the data storage side, you can unlock way more performance, right?
Yep.
So it kind of has this cool effect of like bootstrapping the eco and getting all of the initial Lego blocks on day one is very, very easy because it's one-to-one compatible with the EVM. But it allows for this like deeper unlock of people. Like the more you learn about the optimizations that exist on Monad, the more optimized you can make your application, right? So instead of, oh, I'm just going to fork this code and paste it, and then it's going to be 100x, right? If you are going as deep as optimizing to the state database level for the infrastructure, the application that you're building, right, you're going to get the 1000x. And like users are going to feel that, right? The people that are plugging into Switchboard are going to feel that. And that's going to be really powerful, right? That's like an order of magnitude difference in performance is, you know, it's massive. And like it can get lost in crypto because a lot of the time in crypto, we just like throw crazy numbers out there and it's like no one really knows what it means. But it's an order of magnitude of performance is something that you'll feel, right? It's like, you know, 0 to 60 in 10 seconds. No, 0 to 60 in 1 second, right? That's like so different.
Exactly.
The most interesting though, right, is what that 0 to 60, let's call it, allows you to do, right? And, you know, it's our hope that, you know, this brings new 0 to 1 applications that weren't really possible previously, and that we see. And, you know, again, I'd love to see a lot more on the consumer side happening across the board within crypto. So hopefully, you know, we see the fruits of those effort there.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, we're definitely particularly excited about enabling new use cases for consumer-facing applications. You know, myself as someone who's fully non-technical, that's a lot of what was initially exciting to me when I was first exploring crypto back in 2020, 2021. You know, what would you personally love to see enabled and built in an optimized fashion in crypto? Like, what would you be most excited about as a user?
Yeah, so I mean, again, me personally is really just sort of seamless e-commerce. I'd love to see sort of the eBay of crypto. Things represented with, say, NFTs, and sort of both be able to trade and buy and sell things, but also be able to redeem those said things and actually receive physical goods and services for it. That's sort of been my a lot of my own sort of personal ideas and things I'd love to see. There's a lot more, you know. I think the other side is probably decentralized social. Everybody's seen what Farcaster is building, and it's been really cool to sort of watch the rise of that. I'm personally really excited as well on the decentralized social side for in terms of like actual consumer applications that are, let's call it, non-financial.
To see it happen.
Yeah, one question just for people who are like, you know, listening to the pod, getting excited about Switchboard. Anything that they can kind of look forward to on this Switchboard product offering over like the next 3, 6, 12 months coming out from your team?
Chris, I want to say it.
Well, I was just going to say, since we're on the Monad podcast, obviously we will be live on Monad day one, whenever that wonderful day lands. And, you know, with that, you know, we want to help support cool new use cases on there. So if you want to create new, interesting products, whether it's on DeFi derivatives, whether it's lending protocols, whether it's prediction markets, or whether it's things like decentralized social media and other things that may need to connect to real world data, we want to be there. We want to help you do that. And for those listening to the pod right now, if you type in the code enclaves on our Zila campaign, we'll make a note of this. And we'll be doing some more on the partnership side with Monad shortly. But we're really excited to help really scale and grow those use cases and really help support the NADs on the journey to you know, a high performance fidelity mainnet.
Yeah,
Love to hear it.
And just for the other stuff that I'm really excited about, I think that there's, with the new on-demand model that we're going for, there is no cheaper way to like verifiably bring data on chain. I think with the security measures we take, we have like a 2-tiered security layer with the actual verifiable hardware, and then with the ultimate Oracle consensus. It's the most secure solution. So not only is it fastest, it's the most secure, and also with being in confidential runtimes like TEs are, you can actually give your data feeds secrets or API keys that the oracles can receive but never read. So if you want to go and bring something from some bespoke source, you can actually plug in API keys if you need to your data feeds, and the oracles they will never be revealed to anyone else, even the oracle operators.
I think also just want to zoom out for a second for, a lot of our listeners who are a bit newer in crypto, haven't necessarily been through multiple cycles, but I think the general consumer and the general internet user today, even in the past year, is becoming much more aware of data as a commodity, essentially. And that's obviously, very, very key to what you're doing here. But can you describe, if and why it's actually more difficult to manage this in a Web3 or on-chain environment with real-world data?
I think you have to be aware of the freshness of the data and who can see it first before it's actually commonly available. There's a lot of risk with people being able to know the data. Like, look at any type of front-running applications. If you aren't fully aware of what is fair game or in these systems, you may have surprises for you. So just understanding that when something is present on chain, it might have been present on some other data source first, or let's say in the terms of randomness, people always want randomness from an oracle, and people say, can't you just post it every block? So if you post it every block, what's the security level around it? Is it going to be submitted to the mempool first, and then everyone can view it there, and then someone can try to insert their transaction before your reaction to the randomness lands? You have to just think about, don't want to say another meme, but data availability. So, yeah, I think that's the last one I'll shove in there, but yeah.
Any buzzwords we haven't hit yet? 404 NFTs.
I'll start drawing emojis on a piece of paper and hold them up while I'm talking.
Blobs.
Yeah. Yep.
We're going to hit all the buzzwords on this podcast for sure.
Yeah, account
Blobs was
abstraction.
it.
We got to throw that one in.
Intense. There we go. We didn't talk about
there
intense.
you go. Yeah, decentralized identity-based intents for account abstraction, smart wallets by Coinbase.
Through an LLM.
It has to be. It wouldn't make sense otherwise. So amazing. Cool. So to zoom out a bit, right? I know, Chris, you have this extensive experience, over 10 years now, full-time in the crypto space. Any longer-term predictions around, maybe we can start with Switchboard, then zoom out if you have any other strong beliefs, but what does the next kind of 5 years look like for Switchboard, or even crypto in general? What does this new wave look like at the micro with you guys, and then potentially at the macro level as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we want to make sure that we do is that we optimize for different use cases. The pull model on demand is very customizable and very general, and it is great for the majority of things. But there are certain things such as callbacks that, as the space becomes bigger and there's more and more different things that come on chain, could be better for certain products. And so I never want to say, hey, shut out certain options, or we really want to cater to every use case over the long term that oracles are needed for, and ultimately relying on sort of the consensus that we've built. If we can scale it out to help people solving this general data problem in other ways, we're going to do that. I think just more broadly with crypto, really just bullish more things coming on chain. I know it sounds kind of simple. I know it sounds simplistic, but it really just drives everything else. If stablecoin TVL goes from 100 billion to say 500 billion, well, what do you think that does for the rest of crypto? It means there's tons of more payment activity, tons of more volume. Some people are just holding stablecoins, but most people are spending them, using it as collateral, and it's flowing through the ecosystem. So it sounds cliche, but what I was saying earlier about the on-chain economy sort of expanding and 100xing over the next few years, that's ultimately, in some way, shape, or form, what I think if we're successful, and by we I mean this industry, if we're successful in what we're building, that's hopefully the end result.
Well, you heard it here first, right? More things coming on chain. It's what we need. We need more block space for it, right? We need more performance, and we also need a source of truth to basically bring a lot of these either assets or concepts onto the blockchain.
Yeah, I actually had one other thing that I think is kind of valid to the 5-year plan for blockchain, which is I think the way consensus has done is can actually, people talk about dApp chains a lot. It might have died down a little bit recently, but it's always been a very, very large topic. I think that there could be a world where all nodes actually store history and consensus for each dApp themselves. Then as there's cross-program connection, you build out consensus for a submap of the entire network. And as those touch another program, you build out more of a submap. And you have built-in consensus as the other applications talk to each other. So really, I think you could actually map the throughput of blockchain infinitely because of throughput of other applications until they need to come to consensus with another published contract. And I think that's really the end goal for blockchains.
Amazing. Yeah, and I think that each new piece of critical infrastructure moves us 1% closer, right? And maybe we're at like 35% of the way there right now. But, in general, it's crypto, right? So price appreciation causes a lot of interest. Interest causes a lot of idea generation. And idea generation in a new design space will end up creating a lot of these apps that 10 years from now we'll think of as staples, but maybe right now are just ideas or a concept in someone's head. So yeah, very, very much looking forward to kind of playing our role in that. I know you guys have a very strong role in it as well. So yeah, excited to see what we can do together there. So we do have one final question that we, again, have shamelessly ripped from the Goated podcast Up Only. It's the final alpha. So it really is, it can be anything that you want, a closing thought to leave the readers with, the listeners with. And, it can be a piece of wisdom that you've taken over the years. It can be some edge that you believe not a lot of other people maybe understand fully. Or maybe you just have much stronger conviction in something being important. It actually doesn't have to be any of those things, right? It could be something to make someone healthier, wealthier, or wiser, or stupider. None of the above need to apply. Really just one kind of open mic platform to, give kind of a final piece of advice or tip or closing thought for any of the listeners on the pipeline today.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest one I would say is have conviction. I've been in the industry for so long. There's a lot of ideas that seem like they're crazy, they seem like they're ridiculous, but are proven right, years later. And, again, thinking of sort of the original payments aspect of crypto, a lot of people thought, okay, Bitcoin was going to be used for payments. This was like actually a pretty common thought process in like 2013. Obviously now, that's not really thought of the same way. But in some ways, that thesis has kind of played out via stablecoins. So, from the way that I see it is, I think a lot of crypto is really about having conviction and holding through and continuing to build, even when, there are certain events that may happen that may cause you to lose faith or lose conviction and think otherwise. And that doesn't mean that, you shouldn't adapt, right? Markets change, you absolutely should adapt. But the core theses, the core beliefs of why we're here, I think people need to stay true to those.
I also think for founders, I think you'll get a lot of advice from people trying to watch the market that might think a lot shorter term than you who are obsessing at 24/7. And sometimes you should really come up with defending your beliefs. It's basically the conviction line that Chris is saying. Overall, I had another point, but I might have to say it on another podcast. So. Yeah. Maybe it'll come to me.
We might have to just run this back for episode
Yeah.
2. It's great alpha. It almost reminds me, just because we were already talking about Dan over at CMS, almost reminds me of the do you want to make money or do you want to be right thesis. But I think there's a time and place for both, certainly. And to your point, Chris, have conviction. It's everything in this space to actually believe in what we're doing and to have a long-term thesis. This has been an absolute pleasure to chat with co-founders over at Switchboard. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Mitch. Really, really appreciate you coming on today. I know the community is going to be psyched to listen into this one, and also excited for a lot of upcoming synergy between Switchboard and Monad.
Yeah,
likewise.
Definitely. And how do I get one of those hats behind you? You look like you have.
Yeah, you have to leave the home state and come visit the office. No, we can ship one over to you after this. Yeah,
If you fly me out, if you sponsor the flight, I'll come over and pick it up and just fly right back.
Why not? Yeah, we'll
Brought
see.
to you by Nike. Not the worst.
There you go.
All right. Really appreciate the time, guys. It was awesome getting to chat. Covered a lot of topics. So, yeah, really looking forward to keeping up with Switchboard's updates over the next year here. A lot of cool stuff in the pipeline. Thanks for the time.
Awesome.
Kevin, Danny, thank you.
Kevin and Danny, yeah, great to see you guys. And
Absolute pleasure.
Cheers.